This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. We have got a jam-packed show for you guys today. We've got Hayden Howerton waiting in the wings right now to break down SMU-Nevada and look ahead to this weekend's home opener against Houston Christian. We'll have all that and more on the Pony Express podcast. But first, got to remind you guys, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet. StatusJet.com. Everybody who went to Reno, they had a good time getting there. They had a good time getting back. Had some folks use StatusJet to get out there. And now it's about planning for the rest of your season. Use code PonyUpACC and reach out to StatusJet and talk about how they can help you plan the game day getaway of your dreams. So many great spots to get to. We can do the Bourbon Trail and do Louisville. Obviously, the epic weekend that we're planning around the Stanford game in Paso Robles and Palo Alto. So many more great spots to get to this season for SMU fans. And we are going to work with our friends at StatusJet to get you guys there safely, soundly, and at a level of luxury that you'd expect. So reach out to StatusJet.com today. They're proud supporters of SMU athletics, as well as the On the Pony Express podcast. With that out of the way, we've got to bring in our friend of the program, Hayden Howerton. He's got the new digs there. Wanted to show you guys for the second podcast we're recording together. Hayden, thanks again for being with us all season long. How was this weekend for you? And watching this game now with a little bit of an eye to breaking it down for us.
Yeah, for sure, man. First of all, I just want to talk about how hard it is to win in college football, especially on the road, especially in week 0. I think Florida State proved that as they were out-physicaled and outplayed by a Georgia Tech team. So one of the reasons that is so difficult is there's not really that much film to study, especially when you're getting a program that brings in new coordinators, new coaches. You know, you have about 20 new transfers that are coming in. So you're watching not only the previous year's film of Nevada, you're watching other programs. You're watching Wisconsin and you're watching University of Texas. You're watching triple the film because you're only looking for a couple of guys in each film study. But overall, from the game, again, I'm super excited that the guys won. You know, there's going to be a little bit of a compliment sandwich here as far as that goes. Glad to be 1-0, but there's definitely a lot to talk about.
And you've been in on that side of it where, you know, a game that may be going in, either the team thinks, hey, this is one where we can either pad stats or we should be able to roll. That does got to creep in, you know, to your mind at some points, right? And at the same time, everything can go wrong or a lot of things can go wrong, and the season turned out just fine. For sure.
I mean, unfortunately, my first game my senior year was against Abilene Christian. It was against my brother's team. You know, he's with the Wildcats, still is, and it was kind of one of those deals where I was probably a little overexcited to play, where I turned out and didn't play that well that game, which was really disappointing, but ended up that year playing great, still ended up as an all-conference player, and turned out to have a really great season, just got off to a little bit of a slow start. You know, I did think that the O-line struggled a little bit this weekend. There was a variety of factors, I think, that went into that. You know, it's Justin Osborne's very first game at center. It's a completely different beast than the other 4 spots. Having to get up, make all the calls, you know, make sure that we're all on the same page ID-wise. You're over-communicating, especially on the road. And then with all that, you have to make sure it's great snaps, and you're having to worry about that. So you're starting with a hand between your legs and all the mental stuff on top of it.
And it was the first game with helmet communication for both sides of the ball. So I'm interested to maybe hear about how that played into it, or as the returns come, you know, if plays got in late or if they were looking to see what defenses were doing, how that all plays out. But, you know, that offensive line, a lot of changes up front, multiple new starters or guys in different roles than they were last year. And I'm interested to see what Garen Justice does. We talked about how he's a tinkerer and kind of moves guys around in the spring and does things like that. But Justin's been working at that center spot for a long time now. The new depth chart came out, and Ja'Kai Clark, at least if you trust depth charts, is going to be that starting center. He started 40 games at Miami. They've moved some guys around. I don't know if they're going to tinker with this a little bit more through Houston Christian, but how important is it for them to figure out that look and then let it gel and develop?
Right, you said it. It's got to take time to gel and develop. I mean, this unit didn't have one combo last week that had faced live bullets together. It's a little different than when you have guys that are playing next to each other for years or midway through the season where you really know what each other are going to give you on, say, an outside zone combo. Or if I'm the guard, my tackles knows that I'm going to pull them over early on my gap scheme combos. So I did see the new depth chart, going from left to right. We've got PJ, Savion, Ja'Kai, Logan, and Nate. We can trust the depth chart if we want to. Frankly, I'm fully expecting to see Justin Osborne out there in some role. And I think we could also see Ben Sparks in there at some point, and then later in the season, I think we'll get some Andrew Chambly as well. And then another factor about the game that people don't realize, Logan Parr wasn't cleared until a week and a half left in camp. There was thoughts that he might not even play the first game. And so for him to be out there just speaks volumes to his toughness and how much he wants to help the team. But it's tough when you don't go through training camp and you're barely in shape. And then you got to go all the way out to Nevada and a whole other variety of factors.
I was really surprised that they played him, quite honestly. And I mean, that's not shot at Logan Parr. It was almost more, I guess maybe I was thinking, oh, it's Nevada. They'll be able to play Savion Byrd or Ben Sparks and, kind of weather that and just give him a little bit more time. But he actually graded out really well. And I'm not the biggest PFF guy, but he actually graded out pretty well. I think he was the top run blocker for the team. I could have that wrong. But when you look at the two tackles, PJ Williams came in with a ton of buzz. Nate Anderson was moved there halfway through camp when Andrew Chambly went down and when Savion was kind of struggling out there on the edge. What did you make of their two performances? You kind of dove into them a little bit.
I think it was just a fluke for PJ, unfortunately. I think he's put together such a solid showing during camp that's what I'm expecting to see this week. It just happens, man. You go out there and you're so fired up for that first game, and there's so much expectations on you with, frankly, all of us talking about how great of a camp that he had. There probably was a little bit of pressure on him to go out and perform. Now, it's going to get worse as the season goes on. There's going to be more pressure, especially the more that we win. But I think PJ is going to be just fine. He's a great player. He knows what he's having to do. He's probably beating himself up more than anybody else is at this point. And then Nate, I would just credit that to never played tackle before. He's a guard playing tackle. So I did that my last preseason game in the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals. They told me on a Thursday, hey, you're going to play tackle on Sunday. And went through practice the next day, was fine, went through the walkthrough, and I'm like, I got this. And then you get out there, man, and there's some freakazoids on the edge at tackle. It is a completely different ballgame than playing in the interior. These guys go to the Von Miller Pass Rush Academy. I mean, it's a whole deal. And then not to mention the guy that he was going against, number 0, that Henry Ikahifio guy, 6-year senior defensive end. He spent a year at Cal. He was in his second stint with Nevada. He's a really solid player, I will say. Watching that, he impressed me. He's going to be probably up there for all Mountain West as far as the defensive ends go. But I think Nate will end up being fine. He's a guy that's going to want to get back to work. He's going to want to get out there this week and get a lot better.
And I don't want to spend the whole podcast on the offensive line. So let's flip over to that defensive line that, again, came in with a ton of, just accolades and buzz around them, the depth. And rewatching the game, I felt like it wasn't as much the defensive line got pushed around. I felt like they lost some contain on times against Brendan Lewis. I mean, Nevada only rushed for 158, 150 yards, and most of that was Brendan Lewis, the quarterback, on quarterback draws. I felt like early in the game, they were super aggressive. They were letting the dogs go. And then they realized, okay, Brendan Lewis is trying to play this QB draw game with us. Let's kind of back off a little bit. They kind of played a little bit more disciplined. We saw them pretty much shut them out in the second half, if not for the Brandon Crosley spit gate.
Whole another deal. Yeah, I think they went a little bit into contain rush during that. Probably calmed it back down a little bit just to be able to contain the quarterback and then at the end of the game, they were able to get it done.
Do you see saw some penalties on both sides of the trenches? I mean, is that common? Is that what was kind of your experience with that, with like hands to the face or holding or just getting into that game speed?
For sure, yeah. It's always early in the year because during training camp with no officials, man, you're going to do whatever it takes to win. And that's how competitive I think this SMU football team is. That doesn't mean that they're a dirty team or an undisciplined team. I just think the guys were so good. They were trying to just sneak a little bit of an edge to be able to get it. Like when I was in college, one of the things I did when I was playing center is you get that head crack going. You take your offhand and you're going to punch the D lineman straight in the face off the ball. It's never going to get called in the game. The referees are never going to see that. But it's just something that you're trying to do to create a little bit of an edge. It's not cheating. You're just pushing the rules a little bit.
Speaking of getting a good knockback off the ball, Anthony Booker tank in the middle on that safety. I mean, I grew up watching the SEC, and I remember Terrence Cody in the middle for Alabama, and that's kind of what he is. And watching him just walk that Nevada offensive lineman back, I mean, that's what he was brought in to do. I thought him and Jared Harrison Hunt flashed for SMU as well on that defensive line.
For sure, man. Anthony Booker Jr. is my MVP of the game. I'll go ahead and spoil that for this episode. I think he did an excellent job being in a 4-point stance, coming off the ball, launching his arms straight up off the ground and buckboarding that center to snap his head back. And as soon as that happens, the rep is over for a center. All you can do is try to replace your hands and just cover him up. But Book had him so far in the back of the end zone that he just fell off and made that play right there. An incredible play from him. I'm super excited for him because that flipped the game, man. We were able to get the ball back right after that, put together that big touchdown drive, and then the one after is where we threw it to RJ Maryland, who played like an All-American, in my opinion. Everybody has said it. You know, career high in receptions and receiving yards. Had a hell of a game.
And I mean, so happy for RJ because all offseason he was another guy that was talked about. I mean, he was brought to ACC Media Day, and technically, I mean, he's got another year left. Right. You could have gone with a J.O., a Jonathan McGill, this guy, that guy to go. And I thought it said so much about what they were expecting from him. And after the first half, you're like, man, they've got to find somebody in the passing game. And RJ said, you know what? I've got it. And he deserves all the flowers for his performance.
Yeah, no doubt. I think what Coach Lashley said, where he probably underperformed a little bit in the first half and then was just able to turn it on in the second, I think speaks to the team. I think as long as the team is better finishers than their starters, we're going to be able to win a lot of ball games. I think we have the horses, no pun intended, to be able to get it done in these games. And that's how SMU has done their seasons with Coach Lashley. They've been strong finishers towards the end of the season, minus a couple bowl games, but I do think we're going to be able to get over the hump of that this year. But kind of going back to the short yardage deal, that was my highlight moments of the game. You know, the safety by Anthony Booker that we've already talked about, and then that SMU O-line getting us off the 2-yard line for that 98-yard touchdown drive. That was huge. And then SMU had 2 rushing touchdowns, you know, in the red zone, and then they were able to convert multiple short yardage third downs. I think that was definitely the highlight of this unit for this game, and it's something that they can hang their hat on and say, hey, even though we didn't play as good as we wanted to, this shows us that we're going to be able to be a great offensive line going forward.
Last year, I agree with you. Last year, the red zone scoring touchdowns was kind of the bugaboo, I guess, at times for SMU, especially in some of those big games that they played against OU, TCU. They came away with field goals instead of touchdowns. That's a good sign that they got right down to the 1, the 2, punched it in those situations. I thought that was big. What did you see from Preston as far as his bounce back from you start? Hey, Shane Buechele, the first pass of his career was an interception, and you know Preston, his second year of the starter, his first pass of this season, an interception. Shane's career turned out okay. Preston bounced back and led them to that comeback in the second half.
Yes, sir. I've told Shane this before. I've eaten that interception from Shane. I got bull rushed. It got tipped. Y'all can blame that one on me.
There we go. Clip it.
As far as Preston goes, man, my 2 keys to the game were that the SMU offensive line needs to play well and get some confidence. Unfortunately, that didn't happen this week. Preston needed to get his confidence back early. I don't think that happened either, but he was able to have composure. You know, he was able to take a couple series off, you know, watch Kevin go to work. And then once he got the ball back in the second half, he played like a completely different player. He went out and was able to lead the team on those last 2 drives. And he has a lot to be proud of for that. I'm really excited to watch him going forward. It speaks a lot to his maturity that he was able to do that, especially coming off of a quarterback battle in training camp where Kevin going in the game for most people would be a threat. But I think they're so close and they celebrate together, and they're a really tightly knit group that shows both of their maturity.
Go into that just a little bit for people that don't understand, because on the message board, you're on the Kevin side, you're on the Preston side. But I mean, these guys, they're tight. They work out together all the time. They're still a part of a team that has accomplished a lot over their time, both being on this campus. Does one want to play more than the other? Absolutely. But it's not at that point right now with either one where it seems like they've drawn a line in the sand and said, it's Preston. Sorry, Kevin, you're going to sit there in every scenario and, wait your turn. And if you don't want to wait your turn, there is ultimately the portal.
Right. That's something that's really cool. And I do think that has been the quarterback culture at SMU. I mean, I've seen it from when Buechele came in, and we had Will Brown, who had started games the year before, and they were super excited for each other. It's been the same thing since Tanner Mordecai was here and Preston was sitting behind him. And so now that it's Preston's turn to be the starter, that's just the culture that we have installed, to be excited for your teammates. And even though they are competing, at the end of the day, whoever plays is going to help the team win. So it's one of those deals that they're obviously wanting to play and go out and do what they both did in high school and win a championship. But at the end of the day, as long as this team wins, they're both going to get rings. No one's going to get a ring bigger than the other one. So they really are all in for the team itself. Preston's a great player. Kevin's a great player. We're going to see both of them going forward. Coach Lashley's already made that clear. And so they both need to be able to play well this week and get some more confidence in that room. I think they have a little bit to go off of this past week, but then this next week, I think they're going to be able to build on top of that as well.
Speaking of confidence, they've got to be feeling pretty good about their running back, Brashard Smith, who's now without the oar anymore. But I thought and people don't realize this when they brought Brashard Smith in, they kind of thought they were getting this small, gadgety player. And I mean, he did play wide receiver at Miami. He's now playing running back at SMU. He's an elite return man, as we saw, but he's thick and he ran some people over. He kept his legs moving. He, hey, like Boobie Miles says, roll with it, absorb it. And he was dishing it out there for that SMU offense.
Yeah, I had that written down too from this game, man. Brashard really impressed me. I was really happy to see that from him. Obviously, former receiver, kick returner. You said it. Everybody thinks he's this small, twitchy guy, and he definitely is. But seeing these guys run behind their pads and be able to turn nothing into positive yardage, that's really exciting because you can cover up a lot of, maybe some mistakes, or you didn't get as much of a defender as you want to with a running back that's able to sit down and he's able to run through those guys rather than trying to dance around in the backfield. So he's able to put his foot in the ground and go north and south, and that's something I'm really excited about. I also want to give a shout-out to Jalen Knighton. He had some really nice blocks and protection. This running back group has obviously started to become more of a physical unit over the last offseason and then this year. Knighton had one where he got a knockdown on a pass protection in a 3rd and long, got out, got the reception, and then ended up getting the first down. That was an incredible play.
I think the running back group, statistically didn't have an incredible game. Brashard obviously led the way. He had 140-something yards total offense, but I felt like pass protection was much improved this year for all 3 of those guys, at least from the small sample size we've got in game 1. They were out there unafraid to step up and pick up those guys, which helps because if SMU can work in some Matthew Hibner and RJ rotations, they can still let them out in the passing game, or they could let both of them out in the passing game. They don't have to leave one in all the time. Like I think early in your career, I feel like SMU is leaving in the tight end all the time.
Yeah, different ball club for sure. We had Ryan Becker, who was a great blocker. We saw him pancake some guys against TCU, which was badass. But now we have a little more of a balanced tight end room, with RJ and then our other crew that's in there. I think we have a little bit of a different room, but where we're going to be able to be more balanced in that. Of sometimes, we are going to need to go max protection and be able to take a shot down the field, and then others we're going to be able to take the top off the defense. We're going to be able to split the middle of the field with our tight ends.
Unless you have anything else on this game, can you kind of share with people? Because I've been a little bit in it. It was over a decade ago now, unfortunately, but how hard it is to win on the road and just win a football game in general in college football, especially if you don't bring your best right off the bat, you're immediately in a dogfight.
Right. I think a previous year's SMU team would have lost that game, to be honest with you. I think that this team showed a lot of maturity, being able to wake up and get out of that funk, and still being able to win that game. That game, at least the first 3 quarters, reminded me of the 2020 East Carolina game, where we just came up incredibly flat, got down big early, and then weren't able to crawl out of that hole. I'm grateful that the team was able to be able to get back in the game, be able to take the lead late, and then just hold on to win. But as far as going on the road, when I was in college, our strength staff was big on you win on the road and you dominate at home. Win by 1, win by 100, doesn't matter. You just got to win on the road, man.
And look, SMU is returning to the friendly confines of Ford Stadium with a bit of an upgrade there in the Gary Weber End Zone Complex opening. What an insane facility. For those who haven't seen it, we'll be having some behind-the-scene looks of it on the Walking Strong podcast with Bill Armstrong. But SMU welcomes Houston Christian, 7 p.m. Central. It's going to be on the ACC Network Extra, so it's a part of the ACC Network. It's streaming, I believe. You get it with your cable package if you have ACC Network. And this is a game that SMU won back in 2018 when you were on the team, 63-27. Starting fast, once again, is key for SMU. You don't want to let a team like this kind of off the mat early.
For sure. Yeah, we got to get back on track after this past week. We learned the film, and now we're going to go out and play Mustang football here in a true week 1 of college football, game number 2. But also, the biggest jump in college football happens between the first and second game. Always. Every year, teams get a lot better between those 2 weeks. It's the biggest jump. Guys are able to get live bullets, and they're able to kind of feel out, hey, I didn't see this weakness during spring or training camp, but now I'm going to work on it. And coaches are able to see, okay, this is what we were really good at last week. Let's go back to the well a little bit and start using this a little more going forward.
And for that, you want to see Preston start a little bit faster. You'd obviously like to see them roll in general, and both quarterbacks get a lot of time, but Preston starting fast would be a big piece to that overall puzzle, especially when you think about the next week. You're not trying to look ahead, but you do have a short week with BYU coming to town.
For sure. I do anticipate Preston going out and starting fast. I know he's a hungry player. Knowing him, he probably wanted to play on Sunday after this past week. But, yeah. But I know he's going to go out and he's going to be excited to play. But quarterback is completely different from O-line, as your level of activation has just got to be a little bit lower. Your guards are going to be able to be at 110 out of 100, while your quarterback has to be your field general, your guy that's a little more under control. He has poise, he has posture. I do know that Preston has that in him. I know that they're going to get more confidence in that room. But like we said, looking ahead to next week, if SMU is able to get up big in the game, I anticipate seeing a lot of Kevin Jennings, which is going to be really great for his development and be able to get some more live snaps under his belt.
And for SMU, they are facing a revamped Houston Christian team, as you noted in our notes before. This is a group that has an undersized defensive line, especially for what SMU is going to face the rest of the year. 300-pounder. Zay Smith is a preseason all-conference second-teamer. So they do have a guy with some talent in the middle there. But this is an opportunity for the big old boys like yourself to get out and get moving in the right direction. For sure, yeah.
Zay Smith is who it all runs for up front for the Huskies, and he had 3.5 sacks last season, which isn't a lot, but for a nose tackle, he's able to get after the quarterback a little bit. He had a strip sack in the finale last season. Houston Christian is a completely different ball club than it was when we played them in 2018. They had their first winning season last year. And then on the other side of the ball, they had the number 1 rushing offense in the conference. So while SMU is not playing the level of competition they're going to the rest of this year, it's not going to be a cakewalk. SMU is going to have to get their hands dirty. They're going to have to go to work, and they're going to have to be ready to play. My last note, as far as the key to the game, is be the most excited team to play. Houston Christian, this is their Super Bowl. When you're an FCS school going to an FBS, whether that's Group of 5 or Power 5 or 4 now, it's their Super Bowl. So they're going to go all out, because if they win this game, they can lose the rest of the year, and it's going to be okay because they upset a big team on the road.
And this is an opportunity, and we've seen it in the past few seasons, between Sunny and Red. I mean, they've just been more talented SMU teams. We've generally seen this work out in a way where you see some splash plays. It can kind of be almost a little wonky with a big turnover for a touchdown, a punt return, some splash plays that make this game get out of hand quick. How important, though, is it to get some of the starters, some good quality reps together before it being out of hand, if that makes sense?
It's critical. It's just like the preseason in the NFL. You have to go out and you have to get your starters quality reps against other good people so that you can be ready when the real ball starts, which that's not a discredit to Houston Christian. They're a good football program, at least on the rise. But when we play BYU next week, it's going to be completely different. So it's one of those deals where you need to balance health and development of our players. I in a perfect situation, I think SMU has their starters into the second half of the third quarter, and then they're able to let the young guys develop in the fourth quarter. But obviously, you can't get sloppy. You need those guys to be able to perform, because you're going to have to lean on the guy that's in that second unit that we're not going to anticipate. Late in the year, somebody is going to go down, like last year with Preston, where we had to lean on a guy like Kevin to go win us a conference championship. And those are the games that you really are able to do that, because the risk isn't as high, but at the same time, you're able to learn from it just as much.
And do you have a prediction or any keys to the game here?
As far as a prediction goes, I mean, SMU is clearly the more talented and the better coach team. I do think they're going to have to come out with a higher level of activation and focus than they did this last week, regardless of if it's Houston Christian or BYU or TCU or Florida State. Now, typically in college football, activation is going to vary. That's why upsets happen. That's why Florida State goes out and gets out physicaled by Georgia Tech, because they probably thought they were better than they really were and didn't have to play their best game. But you have to come out every week being the same. Nameless, faceless opponent, you have to come out be the most excited team to play. So my overall prediction is 56-7. I do think SMU is going to be able to handle Houston Christian relatively easy. And like we said, I think they're going to be able to rest their starters to prep for the short week next week. So that's the only reason I have 56. I would love for SMU to put up a 70 piece or a 69 like they did last year against Prairie View. But we'll see what happens, man. I'm excited. I do think SMU is going to be able to get right back on track and get ready to go.
Yeah, I'm going to be right around you. I think I'm going to go 53-6. I don't think they get on the board for a touchdown. And again, I think you're going to see this one out of hand early. I can't imagine kind of the general feeling after, all right, you went on the road and you got to win, but you just got to have still some of a salty taste in your mouth, in a sense. You want to get that out.
For sure. I think that speaks volumes, though, to where we're at as a program. I think 2 years ago, if we would have gone on the road and beat Nevada, I think we'd have been like, let's go. Doesn't matter the score or how it went. I just think we're more at that point to where playing in a game like that early and not playing our best and still being able to come out with a win speaks volumes to where we're at. I mean, offense, defense, special teams played probably the worst half of football I've seen SMU play in the last at least 3 years, and we were only down 7 at halftime. So once SMU gets rolling and they're able to go out and execute at a high level, I think we're going to see the team that we've predicted all offseason.
Agreed. Hayden, before we let you go, one thing we didn't talk about last time, and I do want, as we do this throughout the year and beyond, everybody to continue to get to know you. What are you doing back in the DFW area? Tell us about life and after ball, I guess.
Yeah, so my wife and I have settled down after my retirement. We're living in the Mansfield area now, which she's a nurse. She kills it. She works at a big hospital downtown. And then I'm in residential construction now. So I'm building homes. My dad has built homes his whole life. It was a little bit following in his footsteps, but it's something that I really enjoy because I get to place my hands on people's future. I get to build something really cool for them and kind of see that journey for them. But that's what I'm up to now. But love talking about SMU football, love staying involved any way that I can. I'll be at every home game this year. So if you guys see me on the Boulevard, say what's up on Saturday. I'd love to talk with you guys.
Well, and David Weekley Holmes built the house that we live in. So it's kind of a cool connection there as well. So
yes, sir. David Weekley Holmes. They're not sponsoring this podcast in any form or fashion, but I'm really grateful that they've given me such a cool opportunity.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, Hayden, thanks again for jumping on for us. It's always a blast and people will love this. And we've got so much to learn about this team still. It's just one game. Game 2 is this week. And we'll have plenty more to talk about next week on the pod.
Can't wait to see the Mustangs back in action this week. Really excited for the rest of this season, man. And excited to keep working with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Hayden. We will catch you guys on the other side of this break with more on the Pony Express podcast. So stay tuned and we'll be back to wrap things up. And welcome back to the On the Pony Express podcast. Appreciate Hayden for stopping in as always to talk ball with us. And before we go any further, because there is a new depth chart out for SMU and there's a lot to break down on that front, we've got to remind you guys about our good friends, AKM Turf and Greens. Go to akmturfandgreens.com. Take a look at what they did for McKinney Christian Academy. Completely revamped their entire recess area. You see now they have the turf space. They have the regular grass space. They even built a smaller area for some of the toddlers to play in. This is first-class work from our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. Go to akmturfandgreens.com to learn more about how you can handle some bigger projects for your company, for maybe a school you're involved with. They can do these big projects. I mentioned they're doing, some other bigger projects in the area. You can reach out to them. Info at akmturfandgreens.com. You can also use code PONYUP for $500 off your project today. This is just one of the many examples we've shown you guys. We also shown you the residential backyard chipping, putting greens that they can do. They can turf your area into a more traditional look. They can do some of those other looks for you with pavers and different just overall stonework on the ground to really dress it up. And it's all brought to you by our friends at AKM Turf and Green. So join some of our On the Pony Express subscribers who have reached out and one who's already had their project completed, and check them out and revamp your backyard space today. SMU did release a new depth chart, but before we jump into that, I do want to kind of close with some final thoughts on SMU's 29-24 win over Nevada. And I think there are some things that when it comes down to the opening game of a college football season for a team, and Hayden kind of alluded to it and might have even said it in a big way, is that you're going to, one, make a big jump from week 0 to week 1 or week 1 to week 2, no matter when you kick off your college football season. So look for that from SMU, although with the opponent, it might be maybe a little masked because they take away or they take some of the players out if things get out of hand or whatever. But what you also don't want to do, in my opinion, and others like a Josh Pate, friend of the program, who said he had a great tweet out there, was that from his Meemaw, of course, that people make observations from week 0 or week 1, but fools draw conclusions or something. Look, I butchered that, but the point is, don't take one game and immediately have an opinion on a player or a coach or a scheme or a this or that for the entire season and let it cloud your judgment of what's ultimately going on. And that's the big thing, because SMU is going to now face a Houston Christian team that's probably going to be overmatched. They're probably going to take care of business in a big way based on history in games like this under Rhett Lashley and under Sonny Dykes. That's how good SMU's been as of late. But then you also have a short week and you're going to turn around and play BYU, you're going to have a good idea come week 2 of where this program is. And all of those things that you thought you saw in week 0 or things that actually happened might not actually be the overall trajectory of the team, of a position group, of a player. Last year's season opener against Louisiana Tech, some people were talking about how this defense was going to be bad. And it was a top 25 defense. Now, you can now get into the whole, well, they played the AAC schedule. No, that defense was good. They they played real well against Oklahoma. They got left out to dry by the offense against TCU, which that one got out of hand because of that. And the rest of the way, they were absolute studs. Even Boston College, like they had a tough time containing Thomas Castellanos, and it was quite honestly one of their worst games of the year. But it wasn't a crazy offensive output from the Eagles in that game, and SMU was down 2 starters. So there are things that will happen in games over the course of the year, and you look for trends. The problem with week 0 or with week 1 is you don't have any trends to go off of. So when you look at something and say, wow, the defensive line was really disappointed in them, I've talked to people around the program, and if you go back and rewatch the game, there's the early going, which is this new look group. Remember, they outside of Elijah Roberts, they have all new starters on that defensive line. They went out and they said, go, go, go. And that's what the guys were doing. They were getting after it. And Brendan Lewis said, not so fast, slow down. You've got to respect me and my quarterback draw. And that was about the only thing the Nevada offense had to really respect. And that was what they were able to do moving the football. They had a big mismatch at receiver, caught a touchdown there at the end of the first half, gave them the 7-point lead. But other than that, their run game wasn't that impressive. They tried all sorts of different backs. They weren't consistent. They just ended up getting some opportunities because one, SMU committed some dumb penalties. Brendan Lewis made some key plays, so credit to him. But they were held to under 300 yards of total offense. And, really, in the second half, if not for Brandon Crosley's spit gate, they're shut out because that they would have been punting if not for that. And by the way, Rhett Lashley came out and talked about that today with the media. And Rhett has a funny way of being respectful of officiating and not going after them when maybe they even deserve it post game. He's pretty good at getting after him in the game. But Rhett said, quote, I don't feel like there's any evidence that he misrepresented our program in that moment. I don't know if it went down exactly as they said it was. And that's about as towing the line of being like, hey, this is BS that you're going to get from Rhett Lashley, because he does do a good job of being able to not really go after him. I think at least in post game press conferences and things like that. And that's not to say SMU didn't have an undisciplined game and things like that, but when you have something like that happen and your character gets called into question, even people were going after Jordan Hudson on the board. And when we don't know the information, rightfully so, because we saw it and we didn't really know what was going on. And then after the game, Rhett said, hey, he got spit on. And you can kind of see it there. There's a little head nod from the Nevada player. And, that's the worst thing you can do, I think, in football. I mean, short of, giving it to somebody right in the nads. I mean, that's about as low as it gets. So, you have another example there of when you judge and you look at things and you quickly, go after somebody, rewatch the game. One, I encourage people to do, but this is also why fans are fanatics, and that's what it's short for. There is that emotion, there is that investment, and a team like SMU shouldn't have played like they played. But after the dust has settled, it's probably not as bad as it was, and it's probably not as good as it was either. You look at the overall game that RJ Maryland had, and he would probably want that first half back, but he dominated when he needed to. And that's the type of consistency SMU wants, is for 4 quarters to be as good as they can be. So when you look at this team, that's what they're striving for. And they've only had one opportunity to do it. They had to go play a team that had a completely different scheme, system, looks. They had all sorts of different players. And it's not excuse, it's reality. And it was the first game with the in-helmet communication as well, which I think, and I'm not going to say anything in particular because it is something that I think teams are working through as far as how can I attack another team and how can I make it help our team. And so I'm not going to say kind of what's going on there as the system is being worked out as far as what is best for SMU's offense, what's best for SMU's defense, all of those things. But you're going to see that be something that at the end of the year, we can look up and say, hey, what was going on in X game, Y game, this game? And what were your overall thoughts on the system and how that works? Because it is something that is so different for college teams. And because of the way the college game is played, it's very different than how the NFL game is played with the in helmet communication. So that people want to kind of look at that and say, oh, well, it should just help. It should be this. It should be that. There's chess matches to it. So I'm intrigued to see how it goes over the course of the year. But this was the first game for SMU of a new season with some new tools and technology as well as new players that all have to fit into the scheme on both sides of the ball. There are some glaring things that I think have to be worked out by SMU. I think the wide receiver core needs to abandon the shared rotations. I think the tight end room has shown that Matthew Hibner can get it done. Rhett Lashley mentioned that today in his press conference on campus on Tuesday, that Matthew Hibner played, I want to say RJ played 40 something snaps, maybe 39, and Matthew Hibner played 36. It was some really close um, mix there between the two. And because of that, Rhett said RJ was fresh enough to be blowing by guys in the fourth quarter. At wide receiver, there needs to be a little bit more separation, in my opinion, because I trust, based on what I've seen in camp and based on what I've seen over the last 2 years, I trust a Romello Brinson and a Jordan Hudson over a Keyshawn Smith and a Moochie Dixon at this point. And so that's something that, as we see the season go on, I'm ready to turn that page on that position group from being that 1A, 1B in terms of the depth chart to best two receivers have to be on the field. And then you've got RJ Maryland and maybe a slot or a second tight end and a running back. And that's what needs to happen. And I feel confident saying that because I've been able to see enough of practice. This is a position group that has everybody back except Jordan Curley. And generally, that's a pretty safe bet on that position group as far as who are the guys to step up. That's not to say Moochie Dixon can't do something in a game that's big and helps the team win, or Keyshawn Smith can't do that. But the consistency part for me has been shown up more and more from Romello and Jordan Hudson. And the offensive line, you look at that, they need to gel more. They need to settle some things down. And that's where we'll get to in a second here with the depth chart. The big takeaway is that group. And defensively, you have a group that, again, you have the new in-helmet communication, you have a veteran safety group, you have a veteran linebacker group, you have a defensive line group that is deep and talented, and they just didn't have opportunities to show that because quick passing game, quarterback draws. People are saying, where's the pass rush? Well, when they're forcing them to pass, which SMU would like to, of course, because that means you're ahead, then you're going to be able to tee off on guys. Then you're going to be able to get them in tough situations. And we saw Isaiah Smith get a sack at the end of the game. And I felt like SMU's pressure on Brendan Lewis was not bad early. They were getting to him. He was just stepping up and escaping and then running. And then they started adding on to that and adding quarterback draws. I mean, they were calling quarterback draws on 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12. They were letting it fly. And that's trusting your guys. That's being creative, I think, in your play calling. I mean, if you ran a halfback draw, if SMU ran one on 3rd and 10, fans would be, oh, let's give up. Well, Brendan Lewis was moving his legs pretty well and picked up a couple first downs that just drove people nuts, or picked up chunk plays. I think there was a 2nd and 20 that they had, and he picked up a chunk play and made it manageable. I want to say they picked it up. They just found ways to attack his defense in the right way in a first game. And At the same token, I don't think SMU went in there trying to show their hand too much, which is why when the offense made changes in the second half, that was important to note. They schemed up some ways to get RJ Maryland matched up, do some double moves, do some different exotic things. And I think they changed the way kind of Preston was playing as far as the play calls for him as well. So week 0, game 1 for SMU in the books, and they win. And looking back on it, the opening was bad from the offensive side. The defense was coming out three solid stops right off the bat. And then the fourth was the touchdown that they were gifted on the 9-yard line. And so I think this SMU offense and defense, they both got different things to figure out. They both got different things to worry about. But at the end of the day, they went out, they got a win, and they have an opportunity now to get back on track confidence wise. And then a short week to really get to work. And I think with a veteran group like this, they can be in a groove and they can get to playing football quicker. When you have a group with as many seniors, sometimes, and Hayden kind of talked about it, Preston probably wanted to be out there on Sunday. Well, SMU is going to have a chance to turn the page quick after Houston Christian. They'll be back in it on Sunday morning, working on things and turning the page quickly to that BYU team that will ultimately come into forward on that Friday night game. So lots of things to work on for SMU. You know, we're really, really, you know, watching to see what they do on the offensive line. And that brings me to my next point, which is the new depth chart is out for SMU. And if you haven't seen it, we'll have it up on theponyexpress.com by the time you are watching this podcast. But SMU did make some changes up front on the offensive line. And you look right off the bat with this team, and they're going to go in to this game with, at least if you trust the depth chart, new starters. And Hayden and I talked about it a little bit. We'll see what Garen Justice does as far as tinkering goes. But it's a group that clearly didn't play well enough on the road. And I think they see what the common fan sees from time to time. There are certain players in certain situations where they're going to go and let it play out a little bit more. But there are also situations where they need to make a move and let it play out. And so from left to right, it's PJ Williams at left tackle as a starter, Savion Byrd or Nate Anderson at left guard, Chakai Clark at center with Justin Osborne behind him, Logan Parr at right guard, Ben Sparks at right guard behind him. And then at right tackle, they have Nate Anderson and Caleb Johnson out there with no or in between there. So in my opinion, I mean, you're looking at this and somebody, either Nate Anderson or Justin Osborne, is going to get another go at right tackle. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. I would say, just because you move Nate Anderson to left guard on the depth chart, like where do you go from there? I don't think Caleb Johnson is the answer, and he's just been a guy that hasn't taken a starting role. I mean, when Andrew Chamblee got hurt, Caleb Johnson had worked some right tackle, Savion Byrd had worked some right tackle, and they still moved Nate Anderson over there. So I think we'll see Caleb Johnson play if things go the right way for SMU this week against Houston Christian with that depth, with that just overall beat down that they're aiming to put on that team. But it's going to be a work in progress until Andrew Chamblee comes back. I can tell you that much, because he's really talented physically. He looks the part, and SMU is going to be in good shape once they get him back, in my opinion. I mean, he's just got too much talent to not put it together, in my opinion, once he's healthy. When you look at the rest of the depth chart, the defense is pretty much the same, unless I'm missing something glaring. They didn't, plug anyone else in there defensively. I think the only change might have been, I don't even know if that's it. I think they pretty much kept everything the same for this week on defense. I think the only thing might have been an interior guy on the defensive line, but the Mustangs do have, let's see. Yeah, Jared Harrison. Yeah, it's the same. It's literally the same on defense. So kind of on brand there for Scott Simons not to change anything on the depth chart. But offensively, they weren't done. Rashard Smith is your starting running back. He earned that. He played really well. Then it's LJ Johnson, then Jalen Knighton. And then you have at the wide receiver position, and we've talked about this, getting the best guys out there. Romello Brinson is over Moochie Dixon on one side, and then Keyshawn Smith is over Jordan Hudson, but with an or. So they've switched the sides there, and that'll be something to really watch closely, I would say, because you've got a lot of talent, I think, in Romello Brinson and Jordan Hudson. Keyshawn and Moochie are very talented. They just haven't broken through yet. And I was a big Moochie Dixon guy last year. He was playing with the hand, and he's somebody that I think maybe you see develop as the season gets going a little bit more. He's got so much speed. I'd love to see him break through. But it is going to be interesting to see how that wide receiver rotation goes now that they're going to have a chance to maybe get Romello Brinson and Jordan Hudson on the field at the same time. So those were the big takeaways on the depth chart. Wasn't anything else that really popped through there on that front. So they are going to continue to turn over every stone to get this team right. They know the talent they have. They know the opportunity that they have to make noise, and they know how critical these next 4 weeks after Houston Christian are. Next 4 games. There's a little bit more than 4 weeks there. They're going to have to be ready to play come Friday night on September 6th or whatever it is. And this is the final dress rehearsal for this opportunity. And, the quarterback situation, they're going to continue to play too. So more tape is going to be out there for both those guys. And as far as a final thought on the quarterback situation, because of course we got to have it, it's not going to be enough to put yourself in position to lead a double-digit fourth quarter comeback. It takes guts, takes poise, it takes confidence to do that, and Preston did that. But the experience of getting there is not long-term going to outweigh the fourth quarter comeback situation. Like that, because you're going to play better teams, you're going to be in tougher environments. And it was his first game. I'm more there to say everybody played bad, and quite frankly, Preston's interception didn't help right off the jump, just giving Nevada some boost. But you're not going to be able to go through this 6-game development period like he did last year. And so him coming out against Houston Christian and getting back on track is so important this weekend. No matter whose side you are on, it's so important for SMU to build confidence with Preston Stone and Kevin Jennings this week, and then let the BYU game play out, see how it goes. And then from there, they're going to, they're in a funk. They're going to have to find some answers. And I don't know what those answers look like, but this offense early on is kind of, they didn't make anybody necessarily feel better game after game one with their performance. The only thing I feel really good about is one thing that I knew is that RJ Maryland's one of the best tight ends in college football. And then the other thing is that Rashard Smith wasn't getting enough credit as a running back option. So the rest of it is still unwritten for the SMU offense in 2024. So with that, guys, going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. We'll be there to have your full coverage at ontheponyexpress.com. So subscribe today, get all the breakdown. I'm going to have more thoughts on the depth chart, what it means and all of that. And we also have Rhett Lashley's press conference. Rashard Smith spoke with the media. We'll have more practice notes on the site as the team will wrap up practice availability on Wednesday, and then they'll lock it down ahead of game time on Saturday, 7 p.m. Central, inside Ford Stadium, the Gary Weber End Zone Complex. It's going to be such a treat to get to open that on a game day, and it's going to be a blast. So hope everybody enjoys the Boulevard this weekend, and we will have much more coverage for you at ontheponyexpress.com. So thanks for listening to this edition of the podcast, and we'll catch you guys later this week with more coverage of your SMU Mustangs.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU-on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to OnThePonyExpress.com for more coverage.